The observation lounge of the Meridian's Dream stretched across the entire width of Deck 7, its transparent aluminum walls offering a spectacular view of the cosmos that most passengers had stopped noticing after the first week of travel. Lyralii sat in her usual corner, the one near the emergency exit where the ventilation system worked overtime, creating a subtle but persistent breeze that carried away most of what the other passengers called her unfortunate condition. She'd learned to bring her own tea. The servobots had developed what could only be described as mechanical anxiety when approaching her, their optical sensors flickering in what she'd come to recognize as the robotic equivalent of holding one's breath. The last one had actually apologized. A C-class service unit, supposedly incapable of independent emotional responses, had stuttered out, "So sorry, miss," before practically flinging the cup at her table and rolling away at maximum safe velocity. "Hilarious," she muttered, watching a Rigelian across the lounge suddenly clutch his throat flaps and announce to his companions that he'd forgotten his emergency medication in his quarters. The same Rigelian who'd spent the past 3 hours regaling everyone with stories about his species' superior respiratory systems. The exodus had become so predictable she could time it. First contact, 7 seconds of confusion as new arrivals processed the scent. Recognition, 3 seconds of increasingly creative facial expressions. Evacuation, 90 seconds for polite excuses, 45 if they'd encountered her before. Today's winner for most creative exit strategy was the human couple who'd synchronized their wrist devices, staged a loud conversation about a fictional emergency in the cargo bay involving their equally fictional pet Martian sand cat, and actually ran from the lounge. She gave them points for commitment to the performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," the ship's AI announced in its perpetually cheerful tone, "we will be docking at Waystation Sigma for a scheduled 4-hour resupply. New passengers will be boarding. Please make them feel welcome aboard the Meridian's Dream, where diversity is our strength." Lyralii snorted into her tea. The ship's slogan had become something of a running joke among the passengers, though never when they thought she could hear. "Diversity is our strength," the Andromedan comedian had said in the entertainment lounge last night, "unless you're downwind of Deck 7, Section C." The audience had roared with laughter until someone noticed her standing by the entrance. The silence that followed could have been packaged and sold as a meditation aid. Her datapad chimed with a message from Colony 7's Xenobotany Department, another reminder about her upcoming position. They seemed excited about her arrival, though she wondered if that enthusiasm would survive first contact. The previous message had included 17 attachments about their ventilation systems, which seemed promising in the way that a restaurant advertising its excellent fire suppression system seemed promising. The lounge doors hissed open, and she didn't bother looking up. The pattern would repeat itself soon enough. But instead of the usual hushed whispers and rapid footsteps heading in the opposite direction, she heard someone collapse into the chair directly beside her with a sigh that suggested they'd been walking for hours. "Thank God, a spot," a male voice said. "I've been through 6 lounges looking for somewhere to sit. Is the entire ship having a convention I wasn't invited to?" Lyralii's fingers froze on her datapad. The human, definitely human from the accent, probably Earthborn from the way he pronounced his vowels, hadn't moved. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. She risked a glance sideways. He was unpacking what appeared to be the galaxy's most complicated sandwich, layers of ingredients she couldn't identify held together by some sort of engineering miracle involving toothpicks and what might have been edible adhesive. His hair looked like he'd been in a fight with the Waystation's atmospheric controls and lost, and his uniform suggested terraforming division, though it was hard to tell under the collection of stains that created an abstract pattern across the front. "You're not running," she said, immediately regretting the observation. He paused mid-bite, looking at her with confusion. "Should I be? Is this like one of those emergency drill things? Because I literally just got on board and I haven't read the safety manual yet." "I mean, who reads safety manuals?" "Probably the same people who actually pay attention to the flight attendant demonstrations on ancient Earth aircraft, which is to say nobody," but, he stopped, tilting his head. "Why would I be running?" The scent hit him then, she could see it in the way his eyes widened slightly, the way his nostrils flared. Here it comes, she thought, already calculating which exit he'd choose. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and took a deep breath. Oh wow, that's, Another breath. That's really something. I can move, Lyraeli said quickly, already gathering her things. What? No, stay. It's just, this is going to sound weird, but you smell like my grandmother's garden after a thunderstorm. She had these experimental flowers, complete disaster from a commercial standpoint. The neighbors filed 3 complaints with the district council, but she loved them. Said they smelled like the universe was trying to tell a joke but forgot the punchline. He took another bite of his sandwich. I'm Thomas, by the way. Thomas Walker. And you're either wearing the galaxy's most interesting perfume or you're not exactly from around Earth. Zelani, she managed, still processing the fact that he hadn't fled. Oh, cool. I've read about your people. Something about pheromone-based communication, right? Like, your whole language has scent components. That must make video calls really frustrating. Sorry, can you repeat that? Your smell cut out. He grinned at his own joke. Despite everything, Lyraeli felt her lips twitch. It's more complicated than that. Everything always is. This sandwich, for instance. He held up the structural marvel. The vendor assured me it was simple. 2 pieces of bread, some filling. What I got appears to be an engineering project that violates at least 3 laws of physics. Want some? Fair warning, I think 1 layer might be sentient. It keeps trying to escape. She stared at him. You're really not bothered. By what? The sandwich? I mean, I'm a little concerned about the purple stuff, but... The scent. My scent. The one that just cleared the entire lounge. She gestured around them, and Thomas seemed to notice for the first time that they were completely alone in a space designed for 200 people. Is that why I found seats so easily? He shrugged. Their loss. More room for us. Plus, now I can eat this thing without witnesses. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to need structural support to consume a sandwich? I asked for a knife and fork and the vendor looked at me like I'd requested the nuclear launch codes. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. You're serious. About the sandwich? Deadly serious. This thing could be classified as a weapon in 7 systems. He paused, studying her with curious eyes. But about the scent thing? Yeah, I'm serious about that too. I spent 5 years on Kepler Station where my neighbor was a methane breather who leaked. You want to talk about challenging aromas? Try explaining to your date why your apartment smells like a gas leak that won't kill you but will definitely kill the mood. At least you smell like weather and memories, not like someone's trying to warn me about a pipeline explosion. The ship's AI chimed in again. Departure in T-30 minutes. All new passengers please ensure you have reviewed your quarters assignment. Speaking of which, Thomas said, pulling out his data pad, I should probably figure out where I'm supposed to be. Deck 7, Section C, Room 747. That's optimistic numbering. Either this ship is massive or someone's really confident about their counting abilities. Lyraeli's teacup rattled against the table. Section C. Yeah, why? Is that the party deck? Please tell me it's not the party deck. I brought exactly 1 clean shirt and it's for job interviews, not for pretending I understand modern music. It's my section. They put all the Zelani there. The ventilation systems are specialized. Oh good, quality airflow. Nothing worse than a stuffy cabin. My last ship had this recycling system that made everything smell like feet and regret. This'll be an upgrade. He finally managed to contain the sandwich enough to take a proper bite, then made a face. Okay, the purple stuff is definitely moving. That's either very fresh or very problematic. You don't understand, Lyralei said, needing him to grasp the situation before he got his hopes up about having a normal voyage. They put us there because you smell different. Thomas interrupted. So what? I had a roommate at the academy who thought showering was a suggestion, not a requirement. Another guy collected cheese from different planets, and I mean collected, not ate. He displayed them in our shared airspace. For 3 years. I lived with a visual and olfactory crime scene for 3 years. You smell like rain and ozone and something floral I can't place. Trust me, you're already in my top 10% of neighbor experiences and we've known each other for. He checked his chrono, 8 minutes. The observation lounge's doors opened, and a group of passengers peered in, saw Lyralei, and immediately backed out. One of them, a Centaurian, actually held up his hands in a protective gesture as if her scent might physically assault him. Thomas watched them leave, then turned back to her. Is it always like that? Every day. Their loss, he said, then brightened. Hey, does this mean the food court will always have open tables when we eat together? Because I've been on ships where getting a table is like competing in blood sports, except with less honor and more tray shoving. When we eat together? Well, yeah. You're the first person I've met who hasn't tried to sell me something, convert me to something, or tell me about their extensive collection of anything. Plus, you haven't run away from my sandwich, which shows character. This thing has made 3 security officers nervous. He poked at it suspiciously. I think it's growing. Despite herself, despite years of experience that said this would end badly, Lyralei smiled. You're very strange. Says the woman whose natural scent could clear a room. We're all strange. The trick is finding compatible strange. He finally gave up on the sandwich, wrapping it in what appeared to be containment film. So, Lyralei of the Zelani, heading to Colony 7 for the Xenobotany position, what do you say to giving the strange Earth guy a tour of the ship? I promise to provide commentary that's either amusing or so bad it circles back around to amusing. How did you know about the position? Your datapad's been pinging for the last 5 minutes with messages marked Colony 7 Xenobotany Department. Either you're really interested in plant news or that's your new job. Also, you have 17 unread messages from someone named Dr. Patterson who seems very concerned about ventilation. Like, unusually concerned. Is he okay? She looked down at her datapad, then back at Thomas, who was now trying to prevent his sandwich from what appeared to be an escape attempt. Okay, she said, surprising herself. But if we're doing this, you need to know that the reactions will get worse. There was an incident in the pool area last week. Someone claimed I was conducting biological warfare. Was it the Rigelian? Because that guy seems like he'd claim biological warfare if someone opened a window wrong. Thomas stood, offering his hand. Come on, let's go scandalize the ship by existing in public spaces together. It'll be fun. Plus, I really do need to find my quarters before they give my room to someone else. Or before this sandwich achieves consciousness and demands its own cabin. The auxiliary observation deck on Deck 4 had become their unofficial headquarters after 3 weeks of what Thomas called the Great Migration Pattern of the Meridian's Dream. Every time they entered a public space, the other passengers would perform an elaborate dance of avoidance that he'd started narrating like a nature documentarian. And here we see the majestic Andromedan in his natural habitat, Thomas whispered, watching a tall, blue-skinned passenger suddenly remember urgent business elsewhere. Notice how he navigates the corridor, maintaining exactly 3.7 meters distance at all times. Remarkable spatial awareness, really. David Attenborough would be proud. Lyralei tried not to laugh, focusing on the holographic plant samples rotating above her datapad. You know they can hear you, right? That's the best part. Yesterday, that same guy actually complimented my commentary. Said it was surprisingly accurate before speedwalking away. Thomas was sprawled across 2 chairs, his feet up on a third, treating the empty deck like his personal living room. So tell me more about these storm orchids. You said your grandmother had them. Not my grandmother, yours. You mentioned them when we first met. Neo Singapore, remember? Right, right. My memory's been scrambled since that sandwich incident. I'm pretty sure it rewired some neural pathways. The med bay said I'm fine, but I can now taste colors, so that's concerning. He sat up, genuinely interested. But seriously, those orchids were something else. Grandma got them from this sketchy xenobotanist who claimed they'd revolutionized terraforming. Turns out they just revolutionized the neighborhood complaint system. Lyralii pulled up a chemical composition chart. Storm orchids are actually fascinating from a molecular perspective. They produce a compound that's almost identical to what Zelani generate naturally, just missing 2 hydrogen bonds. It's like convergent evolution, but with smell. So you're saying my grandmother was basically cultivating Eau de Zelani in her backyard? More or less. Though the orchids version is actually more intense. Your grandmother must have had an incredible tolerance for things that annoyed the hell out of everyone else. Oh yeah, that was her specialty. She once played Klingon opera at full volume for 3 days straight because the homeowners association complained about her garden. Said if they wanted to regulate her plants, she'd regulate their eardrums. He grinned at the memory. I think you would have liked her. The deck's doors slid open, and they both looked up out of habit. Usually, anyone who entered would immediately leave, but this time a small group of children bounded in, followed by a harried-looking teacher. Oh cret, the teacher muttered, a denobulan whose spots were fluctuating in what Lyralii recognized as panic patterns. Children, we should. But it was too late. The kids had already discovered the panoramic view and were pressed against the windows, pointing at passing asteroids. Miss Chen, one human child called out. There's people here. Can we stay? Please. The teacher's spots went through a spectacular color shift as she noticed Lyralii. That is, we should respect others' privacy. It's fine, Lyralii said quietly, already gathering her things. No, it's not, Thomas said, not moving from his chair sprawl. Hey kids, want to see something cool? The children immediately swarmed him, because Thomas had apparently never met a situation he couldn't make more chaotic. He pulled out his datapad and projected a hologram of Colony 7's atmospheric processor. This is what I'm building when we get to the new colony. It's basically a giant lung that teaches air how to behave. Anyone know what terraforming is? A young Vulcan girl raised her hand with suspicious enthusiasm for her species. The modification of planetary conditions to support diverse life forms. Textbook perfect, but boring, Thomas said, earning a slightly offended eyebrow raise that was adorable on such a young face. Terraforming is like cooking, but for planets. You take a raw world, add some atmosphere, season with the right gases, bake under a sun for a few decades, and boom, suddenly you can breathe without a helmet. Can you make any planet livable? A human boy asked. Technically. No. Practically. Also no. But we keep trying because humans are stubborn and scientists are worse. I once knew a guy who spent 7 years trying to terraform a planet that turned out to be a really dense gas cloud. 7 years. His reports were increasingly creative fiction. The children giggled, and even the teacher's spots had shifted to a less alarmed pattern. One of the kids, a small Tellarite girl, had wandered over to Lyralii. You smell nice, she announced with the brutal honesty of childhood. Like the storm simulator in the rec room but better. Thomas shot Lyralii a look that clearly said, see. Thank you, Lyralii managed, surprised. My mom says you're not supposed to sit near Zelani, the girl continued, but my mom also says not to eat paste and sometimes paste tastes good, so maybe she's wrong about other stuff too. Your mother's probably right about the paste, Lyralii said carefully. Definitely right about the paste, Thomas added. Trust me, I've been to planets where paste is a delicacy and it's still not worth it. Miss Chen had been slowly gravitating toward them, her professional concern overriding her discomfort. Children shouldn't be eating paste regardless of its cultural significance. That's speciesist, the Tellarite girl said proudly. I learned that word yesterday. That's not quite how you use that word, Miss Chen sighed, then looked at Lyralii. I apologize if they're bothering you. They're not, Lyralii said, and meant it. The children had arranged themselves around the deck, some near her, some near Thomas, treating the space like it was perfectly normal. The small Vulcan girl had even sat directly next to her, pulling out a learning pad to work on what appeared to be advanced calculus. You're doing derivatives? Lyralii asked, looking over her shoulder. Integration, actually. Derivatives are for babies. Harsh but fair, Thomas called out. I didn't learn integration until I was 12 and I turned out, actually, bad example. Miss Chen finally smiled, her spots settling into what looked like amusement. Mr. Walker, are you actually an engineer or just someone who convinced someone you're an engineer? Both? Neither. I have degrees, but sometimes I wonder if they were printed on comedy club napkins. I once designed an atmospheric processor that accidentally made it rain soap bubbles for 3 weeks. The colonists were very clean but very angry. That was you? Lyralii turned to stare at him. The Proxima Centauri bubble incident. We studied that in xenobotany as an example of cascade failures. In my defense, the math was solid. I just didn't account for the local microbes thinking the catalyst was delicious. Turns out when you feed bacteria the equivalent of candy, they party hard and produce weird stuff. Like soap bubbles. Endless, unstoppable soap bubbles. The children were delighted. Miss Chen looked like she was reconsidering her career choices. How did you fix it? The Vulcan girl asked. We introduced a predator species that ate the bacteria. Unfortunately, those predators produced methane, so then the colonists were clean, angry, and living in a giant fart cloud. It was not my finest hour. Or month. The solution to that problem created a third problem, and, well, let's just say I'm not allowed back on Proxima Centauri. Ever. Ever. They have my photo at the spaceport with a big red X through it. It's actually quite flattering. They used my academy graduation photo, so I look young and optimistic instead of tired and concerned. Lyralii found herself genuinely laughing. The sound seemed to surprise everyone, including herself. You have a nice laugh, the Tellarite girl announced. It sounds like bells but not annoying bells like the ship alarm bells, more like the bells in that old Earth movie about the holiday with the flying reindeer, which makes no sense because reindeer can't fly unless you genetically modify them, which seems mean. Breathe, Gimla, Miss Chen said automatically. Thomas checked his chrono. Hey, isn't it almost lunchtime? The food court should be serving that mysterious substance they claim is pizza today. It's not pizza, one of the children said sadly. It's disappointment in a circle. Accurate. But it's food adjacent, and I'm starving. Lyralii, you coming? She hesitated. The food court would be crowded. It always was at this time, and the reactions would be. We're coming too. Gimla announced. Miss Chen, can we eat lunch with the Storm Lady and the Bubble Man? Miss Chen's spots went through another spectacular shift. I suppose, if they don't mind. The more the merrier, Thomas said, standing and stretching. Fair warning though, I might try to convince one of you to taste test my food first. That sandwich 3 weeks ago gave me trust issues. As they all moved toward the door, the Vulcan girl fell into step beside Lyralii. Your pheromone production increases by approximately 12% when you're happy, she observed. It's quite logical. Emotional states should have physical indicators. Clara. Miss Chen said, mortified. What? It's science. I'm conducting observations. Clara pulled out her pad. I'm keeping a journal. Today's entry: humans are weird about smells but not about sounds, even though both are sensory input. Hypothesis: humans are illogical. Evidence: extensive. Thomas roared with laughter. Kid, never change. Also, maybe change a little, because that level of honesty will make adult life very complicated. The food court was indeed crowded when they arrived. The usual pattern began immediately, people noticing Lyralii, the subtle shift away, the sudden fascination with their plates. But something different happened this time. The children spread out like a tiny defensive formation, claiming a large table with the determination of seasoned space marines. This is our table now, Gimla announced to no one in particular. We're doing science. We are. Miss Chen asked weakly. Clara is. I'm doing aggressive sitting. A nearby Rigelian, the same one from the observation lounge weeks ago, started to make a comment, then noticed Thomas watching him with raised eyebrows. Something you'd like to share with the class? Thomas asked pleasantly. Perhaps another urgent medical condition? The Rigelian's throat flaps fluttered. No. Enjoy your meal. We will. Aggressively. As they settled in with their questionable pizza, Lyralii felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the simple pleasure of a shared meal. Gimla was explaining her theory that all food was actually the same food, just shaped differently. Clara was calculating the nutritional deficiencies of said food, and Thomas was building what appeared to be a fortress out of napkins, in case the pizza achieves sentience and attacks. This is nice, she said quietly to Thomas while the children debated whether the green stuff on the pizza was vegetation or decoration. This is chaos, he corrected. But it's good chaos. The best kind. The kind where nobody's fleeing and the only thing being offensive is the food. Miss Chen, who had been silent for several minutes, suddenly said, "You know, I've been teaching for 40 years, and this is the first time I've seen my students this engaged during lunch." That's because we're not teaching, Thomas said. We're just existing loudly and hoping for the best. It's basically my entire career strategy. Is that why you're going to Colony 7? Lyralii asked. Partly. Also because I might have made Earth's atmosphere smell like cinnamon for a week and some people are still upset about it. Apparently, festive wasn't the adjective they were looking for. The table erupted in questions about the cinnamon incident, and Lyralii found herself genuinely smiling as Thomas launched into the story with unnecessary but hilarious embellishments. The food court around them had returned to normal activity, people eating and chatting, occasionally glancing their way but not fleeing. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was something. And when Clara matter-of-factly stated that Lyralii's presence made the substandard pizza taste better, through positive association and improved emotional state, she thought maybe, just maybe, Colony 7 wouldn't be the fresh start she'd hoped for. It might be something better. The gravitational anomaly hit at 0300 hours, ship time, which Thomas would later describe as cosmically inconsiderate. The first warning was a subtle shift in the artificial gravity that made everyone's stomach lurch sideways, followed by the kind of alarm that suggested either imminent death or someone had burned toast in the captain's quarters again. "Attention all passengers," the ship's AI announced with what seemed like barely contained panic for a supposedly emotionless system. "We are experiencing a level 5 gravitational anomaly. Please remain in your quarters with safety restraints engaged for the next 48 hours. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. If this were a drill, we would have scheduled it at a more reasonable hour." Lyralii was thrown against her cabin wall, her collection of xenobotany samples cascading around her in a slow-motion disaster that would have been beautiful if it weren't so expensive to replace. She managed to activate her safety harness just as the ship decided to try a barrel roll. Her communicator buzzed immediately. Thomas's face appeared on the screen, his hair defying several laws of physics. "So, good news and bad news," he said, apparently unconcerned that he was currently sideways. "Bad news, we're stuck in our rooms for 2 days. Good news, I found out my ceiling is actually much dirtier than I thought. How's your gravitational experience going? My samples are having a party without me, she managed, watching a particularly rare specimen float past. That one's worth 3 months' salary. Can't you just grab it? Thomas, I'm strapped to my bed. That sounds like a personal problem. Also, weirdly, that's the name of my autobiography. Despite everything, she laughed. Nobody would publish that. You're right. The working title is actually Goops, an engineering memoir. Chapter 1 is just the word sorry repeated 3,000 times. The ship lurched again, and Lyralei heard crashes from Thomas's room. What was that? My dignity, probably. Or my coffee maker. Honestly, they're equally important to me. He adjusted his screen, and she could see he'd somehow managed to strap himself into his desk chair. So, 48 hours of this. Want to play a game? What kind of game can we play while being thrown around like socks in a dryer? Virtual chess. I found this ancient Earth version with these weird rules. Apparently, the horses move in an L shape, which makes no sense. Horses move forward. Have the programmers never seen a horse? Thomas, focus. We're in a gravitational anomaly. Right, yes, imminent danger, very concerning. He pulled up the ship's diagnostic display. Okay, according to this, we're caught between 2 massive dark matter formations that are having what can only be described as a cosmic argument. The good news is we're not being torn apart. The bad news is we're the rope in their tug of war. That's not reassuring. I'm an engineer, not a reassurer. Though I did minor in disappointing explanations. He started setting up the chess program. Come on, it'll take our minds off the fact that we're basically in a gravitational blender. She accepted the game invitation, and a holographic board materialized between their screens. I should warn you, I'm very good at chess. I should warn you, I'm very bad at chess but very good at making up rules that sound plausible. He moved a pawn. Did you know that pawns can actually move backwards if they're feeling nostalgic? That's not a rule. It is in Thomas chess, trademark pending. They played in relative silence for a few moves, the ship occasionally reminding them of their predicament with creative gravitational interpretations. Then Thomas said, "You know what's weird? Besides everything currently happening." What? This is the longest conversation we've had without someone running away from you. Granted, they're all physically restrained, but still. Progress. Technically, the Rigelian in cabin 745 tried to transfer to a different deck when he found out I was his neighbor. He claimed religious reasons. What religion objects to sense? The Church of Convenient Excuses, apparently. It's very popular on this ship. Thomas laughed so hard he knocked over his virtual king. Did I win? I feel like I won. You knocked over your own king. That's basically chess suicide. Or is it a brilliant strategy you've never seen before? He reset the piece. Speaking of neighbors, did you know the couple in 746 has been playing Klingon opera for the past 3 hours? Either they're very cultured or they're trying to drown out the gravitational warnings. Thomas. Lyralei hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her for weeks. Why don't you mind? Really? He was quiet for a moment, considering his next move on the board. You want the truth or the funny answer? Truth. My ex-fiancée, Sarah, she was perfect. Literally. Gene-modified from birth to be flawless. No allergies, no imperfections, she even smelled like vanilla naturally. Some kind of modified sweat glands, which is gross when you think about it but amazing in practice. He moved his bishop in what was definitely an illegal move, but Lyralei let it slide. And she was miserable. Constantly. Because perfect is boring, and she knew it. She left me for a guy who collected vintage Earth diseases. Not cured them, collected them. In petri dishes. In his apartment. That's disgusting. Yes. But apparently also exciting. She said I was too safe, too predictable. I chose a frontier assignment partly to prove her wrong and partly to get as far away from perfect as possible. He looked directly at the camera. You're the opposite of perfect by Earth standards. You clear rooms, upset delicate sensibilities, and cause 3 different species to claim medical emergencies. You're basically chaos in Zelani form, and honestly, it's refreshing. The ship lurched particularly hard, and they both grabbed their restraints. Also, Thomas continued once the ship stabilized, you smell like rain. Do you know how long it's been since I've smelled actual rain? Not the synthetic stuff they pump through terraformed atmospheres, but real, ozone and petrichor rain. Your scent is like nostalgia I can breathe. That's either the sweetest or strangest thing anyone's ever said to me. Por que no los dos? He grinned. That's ancient Earth Spanish for, why not both? I learned it from a commercial about hard-shelled nutrient delivery systems. Tacos. You're talking about tacos. You know about tacos? I studied Earth culture. Your people are obsessed with putting food inside other food. It's weird but efficient. That's humanity in a nutshell. Or in a taco shell, I guess. The chess game had devolved into something unrecognizable, with pieces in positions that violated both rules and spatial logic. The ship's AI interrupted their game with another announcement. Passengers, we're experiencing some temporal fluctuations due to the gravitational anomaly. Don't be alarmed if you experience déjà vu. Don't be alarmed if you experience déjà vu. Did it just? Yep. That's concerning. Want to know what's more concerning? Thomas pulled up another display. According to my calculations, we're going to pass through the worst of it in about 6 hours. The gravitational shear is going to feel like being in a centrifuge made of rubber bands. How is that more concerning than temporal fluctuations? Because I did the math, and my math has a track record we've discussed. Lyralii looked at his calculations. You forgot to carry the 2. Where? Everywhere. You forgot to carry the 2 everywhere. This math is basically creative writing. In my defense, numbers are hard and gravity is currently optional. He corrected the calculations. Oh. Oh, that's much better. We'll be fine in 6 hours. Fine or, Thomas, fine. I'm hurt by the implication that those are different things. They attempted to return to their chess game, but the pieces kept rearranging themselves, possibly due to the temporal fluctuations or possibly due to Thomas's creative rule interpretations. Hey, Thomas said suddenly. Tell me about Zelani. Not the scientific stuff, but like, what's it actually like? Do you have weather? Seasons? Terrible reality TV? So she told him. About the floating cities that moved with the wind patterns, maximizing the scent communication networks. About the storm festivals where everyone would gather to experience the chaos of mixed pheromones during weather events. About her childhood, when her unusually strong scent first manifested and she went from being popular to being politely avoided. Kids can be cruel, Thomas said quietly. Kids are honest. It's adults who make it cruel with politeness. That's, actually very insightful. I'm going to pretend I said it first. I have it on recording. Damn this future technology and its accountability. The ship lurched again, harder this time, and the lights flickered. For a moment, the artificial gravity failed entirely, and Lyralii found herself floating against her restraints. Thomas? Still here. Though, here is currently debatable since I'm on the ceiling. Or what was the ceiling? Spatial orientation is really more of a suggestion right now. Are you scared? Terrified. But in like, a fun way. Like when you're on a roller coaster but you're not sure if it was properly inspected. You. Also terrified. But less fun, more, we might die in space, way. We're not going to die. The Meridian's dream has survived worse. There was that incident with the sentient nebula last year. Sentient nebula? Yeah, it tried to eat the ship because it was lonely. They solved it by playing music at it until it got annoyed and left. Space is weird, Lyralii. We're just tiny weird things inside bigger weird things. The lights came back on, gravity reasserted itself with unnecessary enthusiasm, and they both groaned from the impact. New rule, Thomas said. No more gravitational anomalies before coffee. You can't make rules for space. Watch me. I'm writing a strongly worded letter to physics itself. They continued talking through the night cycle, through Thomas's failed attempt to make coffee with zero gravity, through Lyralii's successful attempt to catch her floating samples using a method she invented on the spot. They talked about Colony 7, about their plans, about Thomas's theory that all atmospheric processors were actually just very complicated fans. You know what's funny? Thomas said as they entered hour 36 of their confinement. Besides your hair. Because it's currently defying 3 dimensions. Rude but accurate. No, what's funny is that this is the best date I've ever been on, and we're not even in the same room. Lyralii felt her cheeks warm, a sensation that definitely affected her pheromone production. This isn't a date. It's dinner and entertainment with someone I like while the universe tries to kill us. That's basically every date I've ever been on, minus the universe part. Although there was that one time with the food poisoning. Thomas. Right, focusing. My point is, when we get out of this, I want to take you on a proper date. One where gravity is consistent and the food isn't actively plotting escape. I don't date, Lyralii said automatically. People can't handle, you know. Your scent. I've been handling it for weeks. Quite well, I think. Haven't even claimed one medical emergency. This is different. Dating involves proximity. We're proximity NG right now. We're in separate rooms. Details. Minor, unimportant details. He leaned closer to his screen. Lyralii, I like you. You're brilliant, funny when you let yourself be, and you smell like the best parts of home I didn't know I missed. If that's not worth risking a little proximity, I don't know what is. Before she could respond, the ship's AI chimed in. Good news, passengers. We'll be clearing the anomaly in approximately 10 minutes. Thank you for your patience during this unscheduled gravitational event. Complimentary anti-nausea medication will be available in the medbay. Saved by the bell, Thomas said, but he was smiling. Think about it, okay? The date thing, not the anti-nausea medication. Although that might be good too. As the ship finally stabilized and the all-clear sounded, Lyralii found herself thinking about it. About possibilities. About someone who sat through 48 hours of chaos just to keep her company. About what it might mean to let someone that close. Okay, she said to her empty room, testing the word. It felt strange. Hopeful. Terrifying. Perfect. 6 months on Colony 7 had transformed the settlement from a collection of prefab domes into something that almost resembled a town, if you squinted, and had very generous definitions of architecture. Thomas's atmospheric processor towered over the eastern district like a monument to human stubbornness, while Lyralii's xenobotany greenhouses spread across 3 sectors, their bioluminescent panels creating a patchwork of soft light against the purple sky. Your plants are gossiping about me again, Thomas announced, entering Greenhouse 7 with his morning coffee and a suspicious-looking pastry. I can feel them judging my life choices. Lyralii looked up from her microscope, where she'd been examining spore samples for the past 3 hours. They're not gossiping. They're performing chemical communication through aerosol pheromone dispersal. So, gossiping with smell. Got it. He held up the pastry. The cafeteria claims this is a donut. I have doubts. Want to share my dubious breakfast? Is it moving? Not currently, but the day is young. He broke it in half, releasing a puff of purple powder. Okay, that's concerning. The greenhouse's environmental system hiccuped, responding to Lyraliai's amused pheromone spike by increasing humidity by 12%. The plants around them rustled, their modified leaves releasing complementary scents that created what Thomas had dubbed nature's soundtrack. The Harmony Festival is tomorrow, Lyraliai said, accepting her half of the maybe donut. Dr. Patterson asked if we're coming. Did he mention the ventilation situation? 17 times in one message. I think it's his love language. Thomas laughed, then noticed Lyraliai wasn't. You're not going, are you? It's a celebration for the whole colony. My presence would just. Would just what? Make it interesting. Remind people that diversity actually means diverse. He sat on her workbench, accidentally triggering 3 different experiments. Sorry. But seriously, you've revolutionized the agricultural system. Half the colony would be eating nutrient paste without your work. They appreciate my work. That's different from appreciating my presence. The kids don't seem to mind. That was true. The colony's children had adopted Lyraliai as their unofficial science mentor after she taught them how to communicate with plants using scent markers. The sight of 12 small humans following her around like ducklings, each wearing homemade Scent Squad badges, had become common. The kids also think your atmospheric processor is a giant robot in disguise. It might be. I'm not entirely sure what I built anymore. It achieved partial sentience last week and asked for Wednesdays off. He hopped off the bench, sending another experiment into chaos. Come to the festival. Please. I'll be there, the kids will be there, and I heard the Rigelian is bringing his throat flap orchestra. His what now? Don't ask. Just know it's either going to be beautiful or traumatic, and I want you there to experience it with me. The greenhouse door burst open, and Gimla rushed in, now nearly a foot taller than when they'd met on the ship but still incapable of moving at anything less than maximum velocity. Ms. Lyraliai. Mr. Thomas. Emergency. What kind of emergency? Thomas asked. The fun kind or the evacuation kind? The festival kind. Someone stole all the scent markers for the children's presentation. Lyraliai stood immediately. The children had been working for weeks on a scent story, a traditional Zelani art form she'd been teaching them. All of them. Every single one. Clara says it's statistically improbable for them to all disappear simultaneously without intervention, and Marcus said a bad word in 3 languages. Thomas was already pulling up his scanner. Where were they stored? Community center, locked cabinet. Ms. Chen is having what she calls a moment and what we call panic. They found the community center in controlled chaos. Ms. Chen's spots were cycling through colors like a broken traffic light. Clara was conducting what appeared to be a forensic investigation with a tricorder and determination, and the other children were staging what could generously be called a search but looked more like a riot. Someone, Ms. Chen said with forced calm, has taken 37 carefully prepared scent markers. The festival is in 18 hours. 38, Clara corrected. You forgot the one Marcus made that smelled like disappointment. He said it was artistic. Thomas scanned the cabinet. No forced entry, lock's been overridden with a standard colony code. Inside job. Why would anyone steal scent markers? Lyraliai asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew. The answer came in the form of Administrator Huang appearing in the doorway, looking harried. We have a situation. The Prosperity Corporation delegation arrived early. They're concerned about tomorrow's demonstration. Concerned? Thomas's voice had dropped to what Lyraliai recognized as his professionally upset tone. They feel that showcasing Zelani scent communication might be off-putting to potential investors. The room went silent except for the sound of Miss Chen's spots actually crackling with indignation. Off-putting, Lyralii repeated flatly. Their words. They've suggested a more traditional presentation. Perhaps a nice holographic display. Did they suggest stealing from children? Thomas asked. Of course not. I'm sure the markers are simply misplaced. Gimla made a sound that in any culture translated to barely contained rage. Clara pulled out her pad and began typing what looked like a strongly worded academic paper on corporate malfeasance. It's fine, Lyralii said quietly. We can do something else. Like hell we can, Thomas said. Sorry, kids, language. But seriously? They're going to steal your work because some corporate suits can't handle a little sensory diversity. Thomas, don't. Don't what? Point out the obvious discrimination. Call out the fact that they're literally stealing from children to maintain their olfactory comfort zone. Administrator Huang shifted uncomfortably. The delegation is offering significant investment opportunities. I don't care if they're offering immortality and free tacos. You don't steal from kids. Thomas turned to the children. How long would it take to recreate the markers? 16 hours if we work non-stop, Clara calculated. But we'd need supplies. I have supplies, Lyralii said, surprising herself. All of them. In Greenhouse 7. But those are your research samples, Miss Chen protested. They're plants. They'll grow back. She looked at the kids. Who wants to learn speed chemistry? What followed was the most chaotic 16 hours in Colony 7's brief history. The children took over Greenhouse 7 like a small, determined army. Thomas repurposed his atmospheric processor to create perfect conditions for scent marker production, which somehow involved playing ancient Earth music at volumes that made the walls vibrate. Is that necessary? Lyralii asked as something called death metal thundered through the greenhouse. Absolutely not, but the plants seem to like it. Look, they're dancing. They were not dancing. They were responding to vibration-induced cellular agitation, but she didn't correct him because the kids were laughing and the markers were forming faster than expected. The Rigelian from the ship appeared with his throat flap orchestra, offering to help because anyone who makes corporate suits uncomfortable is worth supporting. His musical contributions were questionable but enthusiastic. Dr. Patterson arrived with what he called emergency ventilation units, but looked suspiciously like fans duct taped together. For the festival, he said. Strategic placement for optimal scent dispersal and minimal panic. By hour 12, half the colony had joined the effort. The cafeteria sent food that was actually identifiable, the engineering department contributed containers that violated several safety protocols but worked perfectly, and even Administrator Huang appeared with what might have been an apologetic fruit basket or a small explosive. With alien fruit, it was hard to tell. Why are you all doing this? Lyralii asked, overwhelmed. Because, said Ms. Rodriguez from Agricultural, you saved our food supply. Also, those corporate jerks insulted our kids. Nobody insults our kids. Plus, added Mr. Singh from maintenance, your scent reminds me of monsoon season on New Mumbai. It's nostalgic. When the Prosperity Corporation delegation arrived at the festival, they found something unexpected. Instead of the sterile, scentless presentation they'd requested, the entire colony square had been transformed into a scent garden. Children ran between stations, each one demonstrating different aspects of Zelani communication. The air was full of stories, humor that smelled like citrus and sunshine, adventure that carried hints of ozone and metal, comfort that wrapped around visitors like their favorite childhood memory. The delegation's leader, a severely dressed woman who looked like she subsisted entirely on disapproval, approached the main stage where Lyralii stood with Thomas and the children. This is not what we discussed, she said coldly. No, Thomas agreed cheerfully. It's better. See, we could have given you the sanitized version, the one where we pretend diversity is just a nice word we put on recruitment posters. Instead, we're showing you what Colony 7 actually is, a place where a Zalani xenobotanist can revolutionize agriculture, where human kids learn alien art forms, where atmospheric processors play metal music for optimal plant growth. The scent is overwhelming. You get used to it, Gimla said helpfully. Or you leave. We're okay with either. Clara stepped forward with her pad. I've compiled data showing colonies that embrace full species integration show 47% higher productivity and 62% better problem-solving metrics. Your discomfort is illogical and fiscally irresponsible. The woman looked at the small Vulcan, then at Lyralii, then at the crowd of colonists who had arranged themselves in what could only be described as protective formation. I see. And if we refuse to invest? Then you're idiots, said the Rigelian, his throat flaps fluttering musically. But musical idiots, if you'd like to join our orchestra. The woman's face went through several interesting expressions before settling on resignation. The quarterly reports had better be exceptional. Oh, they will be, Administrator Huang said quickly. Lyralii's agricultural programs alone have increased yield by 300%. As the delegation moved through the festival, grudgingly sampling scent stories and gradually looking less like they were attending their own funeral, Thomas found Lyralii in the quiet spot behind the main stage. You okay? I'm. She paused, searching for words. I'm home. Yeah. For the first time since I left Zalani. This is home. He took her hand, and she didn't pull away even though she knew her emotional state was causing her pheromones to spike dramatically. Somewhere in the crowd, Dr. Patterson's emergency ventilation system whirred heroically. You know what this means? Thomas asked. What? I was right. That first day on the ship. Compatible strange. We found it. She laughed, the sound mixing with the festival noise and the children's delighted shrieks as their scent story reached its climax, a combination of smells that somehow conveyed belonging. Thomas? Yeah. Remember that date you mentioned during the gravitational anomaly? Vividly. I practiced my asking out speech for 3 hours. Ask me again. He grinned, then dropped to one knee in a dramatically overblown gesture that made several colonists stop and stare. Lyralii of the Zalani, terrorizer of corporate delegates, savior of vegetables, and bearer of the best scent in 7 systems, will you go on a date with me? That's not what you practiced. No, but it's better. Also, I may have forgotten the practiced version because your pheromones are making me slightly dizzy. In a good way. Like happy hypoxia. That's not a thing. It is now. I'm naming it after you. The Lyralii effect, when someone's presence makes you forget how breathing works but you don't care because you're too happy. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him, right there in front of everyone. The children cheered, the plants in the nearby greenhouse bloomed spontaneously, and 3 different agricultural alarms went off. Oops, Thomas said against her lips. We're disturbing the crops again. Worth it, she said, and kissed him again as Colony 7's first Harmony Festival continued around them, the air full of stories and scents and the chaotic beauty of compatible strange.